Good morning, afternoon, and evening to you all. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the fourth webinar on electrifying city fleets with our guest speakers from the City of Portland, Black Veatch, and Motiv Power Systems. We want to say a big thank you to our webinar sponsor today, Idaho Power. My name is Simbiat Yusuf, Member Relations Manager at Fourth, and I have some brief announcements before I hand it over to Tegan Molloy, Senior Program Manager at Fourth, and our moderator today. Attendees, please be sure to submit all your questions through the attendee chat. We'll get through them during the Q&A. We'll be also sending the webinar recording and presentation after the webinar today. If you have any questions, we'll be sending a recap email, and we will have some additional resources from our speakers as well. Fourth is a nonprofit trade association advocating for smart transportation. We are working in four main focus areas, which are demonstration projects, industry development, advocacy, consumer engagement. If you would like to get more information about Fourth, who we are, you want to become a member of Fourth, you can find more information about that on our website at fourthmobility.org. And the call for proposals for the Roadmap Conference coming in June 29th through the 30th of 2021 is still open. Proposal submission deadline is November 20th, 2020. If you're working on any case studies, papers, research, please feel free to submit your topics and suggestions for the proposal. The Roadmap Conference is coming back in person. We will also be monitoring the COVID situation, hoping we can have a live Roadmap Conference where we can all network, but we'll be monitoring the COVID situation. And we have an exciting lineup of over 50 speakers, including keynote speaker Dr. Robert Bullard, the father of environmental justice, with additional speakers including Ingrid Fish of the Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, Evening Ward's Dr. Shelley Francis and Terry Chavez, ICCT's Ann Boo, the Green Lining Institute Anna Kreger, Austin Energy's Amy Atchler, and our own Sabrina Carrera joining the panels. If you have any questions about registration, joining the e-mobility equity virtual conference, which is taking place November 12th through the 13th, you can find that on the website below, emobilityequityconference.com. We will also be sharing a link in the webinar recap as well. And with that, I will pass it along to our moderator for today, Tegan. Tegan.
Hello from Portland, Oregon, folks. My name is Tegan Molloy, and I'm a senior program manager at Fourth. I have the privilege of leading the demonstration projects team here, and we're currently running a diverse portfolio of electrification programs and projects that run the gamut from micromobility to rural car share, vehicle charging innovations for multi-unit dwellings, workplace charging, low-income financing for TNC drivers, and all the way up to demonstrating new e-tractor technology now. We also work with cities to advance their climate action, transportation, electrification goals. Today, for today's webinar, we'll be covering quite a bit, including, and let me just move the slide here, okay, including electric fleet charging best practices, fleet vehicle case studies, lessons learned from fleet electrification, business models, and how you can get started, an example of how cities could meet their climate action goals, and guidelines for cities and municipalities moving to an electric fleet. So let's transition to our fabulous panelists now. Note that we have had one switch. Paul Stith will no longer be joining us today, but in his place is Randal Kaufman. Randal is the sales director for Black Veatch's Transformative Technologies business. With over 15 years of experience in the electrical power industry, Randal has expertise in EV charging infrastructure and complementary energy delivery systems, data centers, distributed generation, energy management, power quality, and backup systems. Our second panelist is Kash Sethi, Vice President of Sales at Motiv Power Systems. Kash is a forward-thinking sales and business development executive with a background in EV, utilities, and renewable industries. As Vice President of Sales, he spearheads Motiv's engagement with fleet customers, truck and business partners, policy stakeholders, and dealers. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Alan Bates, Fleet Operations Supervisor with the City of Portland. Alan is he is helping the transition to the fleet to net zero. He has more than 2 decades of project and product management on marketing experience with senior leadership roles at Envoy, Reach Now, Shore Power, Evo, and Equifax. So for this chilly autumn morning, I guess it's morning here, but maybe not for everybody, I thought it'd be fun if we had an icebreaker question before we dive into our presentations from our panelists. So we'll start with, if you were a fleet vehicle, what would you be and why? Who's our first brave panelist today?
I'll go first. I would say probably a shuttle bus, because every time I'm with friends and families, I'm always the one driving the bus or the truck or the minivan. I like looking up directions. I like making a plan. I like being in control on when we're going to stop and we're not going to stop. So if I had to pick one, I'd probably be a bus driver, having my coffee. Being a truck driver sounds less fun.
Thanks, Kash. We have Alan, or Randal.
Thanks. Great question. I think I'd like to be a refuse truck. The predictable routes, it does great service. It's you put your trash out and it just goes away, but there's a whole ecosystem behind that and great opportunities to improve sustainability in waste management. And also potentially with these zero emission technology, maybe they'll make a little less noise in the morning too.
Thanks, Randal. How about you, Alan?
And so I thought I went very logical on this one. I wanted to be a share capable autonomous F-150 pickup. So the fleet, the workhorse in the fleet is the pickup for us in a lot of ways in Portland and other communities. And so I love the idea of a shared vehicle that's also has autonomous capabilities, and I'm excited to see what the world of the pickup, the electrification of the pickup in the next couple of years. So that's what I said.
Nice, Alan. Well, thanks, everyone. I'm going to pick an electric USPS truck, mainly because I love snail mail and personally am extra appreciative of how critical a role USPS is playing in our democracy during the election. So. And I think we'll hear more about USPS trucks in Kash's presentation. So, all right. Well, with that, we do have 2 poll questions also that we'd love to put forward. And Simbi, I don't know if you can cue that up. Great. So if everybody can take this first poll question. What excites you most about EVs? All right, we really have a strong winner here. Okay, looks like operations and fuel cost savings is winning at 67%. Second up is maintenance cost savings. Performance is at 9%, and a quiet and smooth ride is last at 4%. Okay, well, thanks everyone for participating in that poll. We've got one more poll as well. So the second poll, if we can cue that up, Simbi. And thank you, Symbiot and Crystal, for all the behind the scenes work that you've put into all these webinars. Second question is, what is the top barrier for you to switch to EVs? We've got higher upfront costs, lack of available vehicle options, charging infrastructure hurdles, or range not enough for routes. This one's a little bit closer. All right, looks like we have almost a tie, but a winner here just by a little bit, which is charging infrastructure hurdles. Next up is the higher upfront cost at 33%, lack of vehicle options is 28%, and range is not enough is at 5%. So, all right, thanks everybody for sharing. Okay, so first up, we've got our presenter Randal with us. Randal, please kick us off.
Oh, thank you, Tegan. Special thanks to Forth for putting on the webinar, my fellow panelists, and most importantly, you, the attendees. We appreciate your time and consideration this morning. So I'm Randal Kaufman with Black Veatch, and we'll be talking about some of our experience with fleet electrification. A little bit about Black Veatch first. We've an engineering construction company based out of Overland Park, Kansas. We've been in business for over 100 years. Our focus is on critical human infrastructure. And our division is really focused on fleet decarbonization. So what does that mean? That means electrification of vehicles. It means utilizing hydrogen and other clean gas as a bridge, but also, as you'll see from the presentation, we get into the infrastructure, the whole supply chain and delivery of clean, resilient energy for transportation use cases. So when we're thinking about transportation and fleets, well, there's an opportunity to consider energy generation, energy storage, building energy as part of the ecosystem. Our experience is broad and deep. We have over 1,200 high power charging stations deployed in the US, and lots of megawatts of clean renewable power also that we've deployed in support. Regarding sustainability, our company, I'm very proud that we touch all aspects of sustainability, but for the purpose of today's discussion, as I mentioned, we'll focus more on zero emission transportation and the opportunities for zero emission energy on the generation and facility power side. So one of the most important things is to balance all the players involved. So when considering a project, who are all the stakeholders, not just the owners of the vehicles, but the users of the vehicles? Where is the infrastructure going to be deployed to, if it's electric vehicles, to charge them, if it's hydrogen vehicles, to provide the hydrogen? What incentives are out there and policy considerations? So there's that aspect of it. Then there's the financial aspect, and we'll get into a little bit. It's a great opportunity to consider other financial arrangements, other business methodologies to support the infrastructure, the ongoing fueling of the vehicles, the maintenance of the vehicles. As I've mentioned, and I'll mention quite a bit, the building load integration. How can we utilize on-site solar and other aspects of energy storage, and also the cost aspects of what's the cost of utility power at the time, and what are some of the opportunities to minimize that depending on the utilization of the vehicles, what's the dwell time, what range is needed, what are the size of the batteries. So there's all this whole cost of energy opportunity must be considered early. Then there's the resilience. How do you ensure that the energy is always available, that the vehicle is always available for use? How do you consider, since technology is moving so fast and the availability of vehicles keeps getting better, so how do you plan your infrastructure in such a way where you can accommodate new technologies, where you can accommodate the expansion of the fleet and other use cases? What about timelines and budgets? There might be different tranches of availability of budgets at different times. So how do you plan your project around that? Also, some of the incentives and all that might have an expiration date. So what about your timelines for your project? And then finally, well, not finally, but from this list, what's the cost of operation? How does that figure in their total cost of ownership of the vehicles, which seems to be a real advantage and benefit for electrification and other opportunities with zero emission. So some of the lessons learned with our extensive experience doing EV charging and hydrogen fueling, starting early, work with your local utilities. There's probably other entities in the area that are also looking to put in EV charging infrastructure. So the utility would have a really good handle on that. You know, if you don't talk to them, they don't know you're doing it, it could affect their plans. Also from a cost standpoint, what are the best tariffs to get on from your cost of energy? There's a variety of reasons to start talking to the utility early. There might need to deploy other infrastructure in the area to support the EV charging. New transformers, maybe even a new substation. If they have to bring in a new circuit, there's a lot of different things that the utility could help with if you let them know early. There's also other agencies involved. Different jurisdictions may have different priorities, different requirements. So you have to start early with them. Understand the whole list of agencies that have requirements for your infrastructure upgrades. And again, that also goes with the state requirements, so not just local. Understand what incentives are available. Different states have different incentives. There's some federal incentives. There might even be some local incentives. Utilities have different incentives. Some programs have requirements like monitoring, metering, providing information. So understanding all of that to put into the plan. So the bottom line is get started very early on planning, and then you'll avoid extra costs as you go through the project. One thing we have learned is that any changes in the middle of the project are very expensive and time consuming. So this is right, it's important to start. So also some examples of what does it take, depending on how many vehicles, what kind of charging, just some general idea of the amount of time it takes for utility upgrades. So starting with, maybe people might be familiar with level 2 charging, which would be like an AC charger. So those are lower power. You can put more of them on an existing service or simply with a transformer upgrade from the utility. That could be fairly quick. But when you start getting to more heavy duty vehicles with bigger batteries, more high powered chargers, you quickly get into extended lead times for what it takes to provide the utility service. A new feeder, as an example, could be about a year. If you have a very large site like a transit fleet with large capacity buses, any other semi trucks are coming. So that might need a new substation. That could take a couple of years to get a new substation to deliver the power. So again, going back to starting early, talk to the utility. You'll have an understanding based upon what your anticipated fleet size and charging requirements are. The utility will be able to determine what is going to be needed to support the charging infrastructure. I agree too. So regarding business models, so what we're finding is that there's as a service, energy as a service, charging as a service is becoming quite popular. And the reason why is there's a lot of unknowns with infrastructure costs. And there's a lot of finance companies that are interested to invest in this really industrial revolution of charging. So to make it easy, especially when the focus of the business is on transportation. That's it, moving people and goods from A to B. This whole energy is new. So, and especially with the investment required to put in the charging infrastructure, just the fueling infrastructure, I should call it, there's a lot of costs and a lot of time. So as a service is a common business model, but we're also finding some other opportunities for like co-op. As an example, some of these data centers, they're the wholesale where they'll build the data center. They might have multiple tenants that share the resource. It could be the same thing with charging and hydrogen fueling, where you may have multiple entities that all share in the operation. Just some examples. But in the industry, you have the fleet owners, you've got the traditional fueling companies, you have the OEMs, you have the utilities, energy providers, and of course the municipal agencies that all could work together to come up with a variety of different solutions So there really is an opportunity to do things differently than in the past to everyone's benefit. Finally, I could go on for a long time, but of course we want to have time for fellow panelists and most importantly, your questions. So we do have additional resources available. We've written the book on fleet electrification. We've written the book on working with utilities for electrification. We've written about connected communities and autonomous, a variety of other important topics for your consideration. So feel free to visit our website as you see, or contact me or Black and Veatch to further the discussion. Thank you very much, and to turn it over to Forth and my fellow panelists.
Thanks so much, Randal. If there's one thing I geeked out on, there was the business model slide. And our next panelist is Kash Sethi, Vice President of Sales at Motiv Power Systems. Take it away, Kash. Thank you.
Thank you, Tegan. Let me see if I can start my slides here. So I'll do a quick intro to who Motiv is, in case you haven't heard of us, and then I'll dive into some of the actual deployments we've done in the medium to heavy duty space, with a special focus on 2 deployments. I'll run you through what worked well, what didn't work, and I'll try to summarize with here's my recommendation list. Here's 10 things you should do as you start to plan for your fleet to go green. So who's Motiv? We are essentially a chassis electrifying company. We take Ford chassis, we electrify them, approved by Ford. They have a qualified vehicle modifier program. Many of you may be familiar. Essentially, it means that if we take a Ford chassis, make it electric, Ford engineers have looked at the way we're doing it, our packaging, brackets and such, and they're happy with the kind of safety margins we have in the design. As a result of the approval, the Ford warranties stay intact. We focus class 4 to 6 primarily. California company, a couple locations out west, but chassis electrification obviously happens in the Midwest. After the chassis is electrified, we work with a wide variety of truck and bus builders in the Midwest, who are then able to take that electric chassis and put it on the same production line where they're building thousands of gasoline and diesel vehicles every year. It enables these bus and truck builders to offer electric versions very quickly to market because the underlying Ford chassis is the same. Essentially, we are software and power electronics specialists. We take the best components and we integrate the system together seamlessly. 5th generation technology, we've got about 100 vehicles on the road, and we're going to double that number every year from here on. And some of the vehicles have 100,000 miles on them. So we've got a lot of experience on what works, what doesn't work. All of the vehicles you see on the screen here are built by Motiv, electrified by Motiv. The underlying technology is all the same. Here's the 3 chassis platforms we do. We have the Ford E-Series, E450, available in both a cab over and a cab and a stripped platform. An F59 and F53. So class 4 to 6, and we're putting passenger car batteries on these things. So instead of buying cells from Asia and assembling our own packs, we're actually using BMW's passenger car batteries. We signed an agreement with them a year and a half ago. The battery you find in the BMW i3 or an i8 car, we take 3 of them and we put them in these trucks and buses. So it really enables us to count on BMW's robust manufacturing processes, their automation, their QA protocols, all of them carry flow through our products. Okay, enough of that. Here's a quick snapshot of what we actually do. Slide got stuck here for a second. Okay. So I'll jump to the different case studies, vehicles we've actually deployed, and 2 of them is what I'll dive a little bit deeper into. Aramark, these are linen and uniform rental fleets. They put 30 on the road, 5 different depots. The fleet's got more than 300,000 miles now, very high uptime, and they're going to more than double that fleet next year. I'll dive more into that fleet in a case study slide. Then our oldest vehicles are our city buses. These are transit vehicles in city of Mountain View, built and deployed in partnership with Google, who has their headquarters in Mountain View. 6 of them are on the road today for more than 5 years. These were part of the early early technology demonstration pilot funded partly by the government. And the grant period is over, but the buses are still running strong. Some of them have 100,000 miles. The fleet overall has 400,000. Early generation technology, but customers are really happy. People love the fact that there's no noise and no vibrations. A lot of the citizens of Mountain View who take this service are senior citizens, so they really appreciate the lack of vibration and noise. We get that feedback all the time from them. We have school buses, Type A school buses, in partnership with Transtech and Collins, a couple of reputed school bus brands in the country. We've got 18 of them across different school districts, so we had to deal with each different depot. What's the charging situation at this depot? Training drivers at each different depot. So 18 buses across 4 different districts, 4 different projects, essentially. Similar story in Southern California. We put 20 of these mid-sized school buses built by Starcraft in Indiana across 12 different depots. So a lot of work around charging infrastructure and what it really means and what not to do and what to do. And then postal service trucks, that picture looks like Tegan. That's what she wants to be, a mail truck. We electrified 7 of them. I've got a slide on that specifically. And bottom right, Bimbo Bakeries is the world and the country's largest bakery company. It's a Mexican company, hence the word Bimbo. A couple of brands you may be familiar are Oro Wheat and Entenmann. Most supermarkets you'll go to, you'll find a brand of bread that's eventually owned by Bimbo Bakeries. They put 5 on the road this year, extremely happy with it. One unique thing here was that we went to that depot and we found that if we were to put full level 2 19 kilowatt charging on there, it would need a utility upgrade. And we just heard from Black Veatch that it's complicated to navigate that. So I have a question in here that the audio is not working. Tegan, just going to flag it for you. What we found that was we could right size the charging infrastructure. You don't always have to get the fastest charger, right? Because the fastest charger means the most utility upgrade. Right sizing means looking at your actual routes. What mileage do you need to drive every day? How much time do you have to charge every day? Add some safety margin on top, and that's the kind of charging infrastructure you need. So at the Bimbo side, we were able to avoid a utility upgrade and do a really cost-effective solution. So let's dive into a couple of these and have a closer look. Aramark trucks, so 30 trucks, 5 different depots. One depot was getting 10 trucks, which meant it needed a power utility upgrade, a new substation. And we just saw a new substation can take 12 to 18 months. That's what happened. They told us 12 to 18 months. It actually took longer than that. So we had the nightmare situation where we had trucks, very expensive EV trucks, sitting there without charging. That's a situation we are hell-bent on avoiding in the future. We had some hurdles in early technology with 12-volt batteries. The traction batteries in the vehicle would drain the 12-volt battery very quickly. We were able to solve that very easily by using a more robust 12-volt battery and a software upgrade. A lot of drivers initially were like, what's this EV truck? I'm used to my big diesel truck, and change is not always easy. But I have to say, after 1 or 2 months, they really started loving it. They really appreciated the quietness, how smooth it was. These drivers didn't have to worry about stopping for gas. They really, really liked that. The general managers at each depot initially were also like, what's this corporate sustainability initiative you're shoving down my throat? But now they love these trucks because of fuel maintenance and savings. They're saving so much money on these every month that it really makes it important for them to use these EVs as much as we can. So you can see on the right side how the cumulative mileage has gone up rampantly, and savings have gone up as well. They're saving a decent chunk of money every month, and as a result of that, they're going to double this fleet every next year and hopefully every year. The uptime has fluctuated between 90 and 100. They were early adopters, so we had some early technology issues, but we never dropped below the 90% uptime. Their target was 97, and I have to say the last year or so has been really good. We've consistently been above 95, closer to the 100% mark. The Postal Service trucks, these were deployed after a lot of rigorous testing. So we had an army of engineers who came here from DC. They wanted to test range. in different conditions, acceleration 0 to 30, 30 to 60, to make sure drivers will be happy with it. Initial deployment, we limited it to 60 miles per hour. That was kind of the spec, and it's for safety reasons. But 60 miles per hour is okay for most USPS applications because they're last mile local routes. However, these two depots were in the middle of Central California. These drivers are actually getting on the highway for 10 miles and then beginning their route. For those 10 miles, 60 miles per hour was not enough. Fortunately, we were able to upgrade and fix that via a remote software upgrade, solve that problem. So lesson learned there was that let's not have a national fleet. Let's really study what the route's going to be like for your deployment and customize it accordingly. The fleet's got 30,000 miles on it now. So I'll wrap up with just my list of key takeaways, right? Look at your routes and usage patterns. Are there hills on your routes? Is it highway versus city? Take all of that into consideration as you decide whether EVs are the right technology for you, besides the environmental benefits. Range, there's a lot of numbers out there. What to believe, right? You'll see the kilowatt hours per mile fluctuate from 0.8 to 1.5 from manufacturer to manufacturer. There's not a whole lot of standardization. Try to be a little bit more conservative, especially if you use a lot of HVAC. Your range will get affected. Take that into account as you're designing these vehicles. Confirm the EV fit. Make sure the total cost of ownership analysis is there. Right size your charging infrastructure. If the utilities involved, start early. It's key. You don't want to have trucks or buses before chargers. Formal driver training is important. These vehicles are new for drivers. If you train them properly up front and then a refresher 1 to 3 months, we found that to really work well. And a robust support plan is also very important. Technology is new. Make sure your manufacturer has some local support. Dealers and third parties are not fully trained yet on this new technology. You need the manufacturer there. And last, optimize and adjust as needed. Initially, for the first month, keep a close eye on the vehicle performance. How are drivers liking it? Be close to your manufacturer. The first 1 to 2 months can really dictate how successful the long term is for the project. So happy to answer more questions, provide more information, but with that, I'll wrap up here.
Thanks so much, Kash, for that extra look at electric-powered intelligent chassis and my favorite, the Postal Service vehicles. We've got some good questions coming in. We'll be asking them at the end. And next up, our panelists, our third but wonderful panelist is Alan Bates, who's the Fleet Operations Supervisor from the City of Portland. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Tegan. Thanks, Randal and Kash as well. Great presentations. And today I wanted to just talk about, we're at this real tipping point for fleet electrification, and Portland's not unique. We, like many cities, we've got a lot of vehicles. We're just trying to figure out how to move down the road. So let's start with the resolution. So that was adopted in 2017 for Portland, which is 100% renewable by 2050. So you can see the orange line is where Multnomah County is, which is where Portland is. We're trending towards that green line, and we still have a lot of work to do. We've got, a number of years to get there, but we've got a lot of work to do. And obviously, one of the biggest stumbling blocks is infrastructure. But I'll talk about exactly what we're dealing with here at the City of Portland. So, City Fleet is a service bureau, and we serve bureaus like the Water Bureau and Parks and Bureau of Transportation. And what we do is we design the vehicles, we purchase them, we maintain them, and then we dispose of them at the end of their life. And all told, we have about 3,500 pieces of equipment that we do those things with, 2,600 motorized vehicles. And among the motorized, we have about 195 plug-in hybrid or battery electric or straight gas hybrid engines. We have 82 current level 2 charging stations. So we're just kind of at the early stages, really. And we've done a lot, but we have a long way to go. In those vehicles that we maintain and buy, we have about 350 that we replace every year. So those are the ones now that we need to start transitioning to alternative fuel, renewable fuel. You can see where our counts are for battery electric and plug-in hybrids. So we've got a lot of Fords. We've got some Volts, we've got Leafs, we've got Energies. So we've got a number of different types of vehicles, and this is what's been in market so far, right? For mostly sedans. We're going to see a heck of a lot more exciting, trucks, medium and heavy duty, as Kash pointed out, coming into market and being more mainstream. And in order to get to where we need to go, we've got to start to electrify. This is kind of a great snapshot of a recent analysis that was done. We're partnered up with our local utility, which is Portland General Electric. They conducted an analysis of our whole fleet using a consultant called EIQ. And what they found is that 720 of our vehicles right now are economically feasible to transition to electric, which is really exciting. Over a 10-year life cycle, the estimated savings for those vehicles compared to internal combustion is almost $9 million. It's huge. So what we're looking at is really taking all those dollars in savings, right, and injecting them into our infrastructure. So, we've got to sort of do it as we can, but this is where we're at this moment. That represents also 21,000 tons of CO2 reduction over that 10-year life cycle. So really exciting numbers. This is really hot off the press. So this is something that we're attacking head on. And in fact, we have a request for proposal that'll be coming out in the next 30 days that will address charging as a service. And that's really what I want to talk to you today about, which is our dilemma. The dilemma that we have and that many cities have is lack of capital. We don't have the budgets, especially during COVID, right, to be able to go and put millions of dollars into charging. We lack the experience. We lack the resources. This isn't our thing. The market is not mature. There's a ton that we have to learn about how to do this stuff and how to do it correctly. And we frankly don't want to invest outside of our core competencies. We maintain the city, but charging is not something that we really want to do. So where we have arrived is charging as a service. And I think Randal pointed it out. This is one of the business models that's coming quickly. And the reason it's going to be popular and probably, I think, going to be the most logical for most cities is it's transitioning capital expense, upfront capital, to operating expense, which is the affordable monthly pay-as-you-go method for really adopting electrification. That's funded by the fuel and maintenance savings. And you see all the things that charging as a service combines. It's a turnkey service. Essentially, we say, go put in 100 charging stations in this parking lot. Call us when they're ready. We're going to go plug in, and we'll pay as we go. Now, one of the biggest considerations for this is what we call the make ready. And make ready is basically the stuff inside that box, which is everything that leads up to the charging station. Traditionally, there has been an allowance from utilities to help make some of those electrical connections, right? However, there's a lot more that needs to be done with charging. And that's where these tight partnerships with utilities and their relationships with the Utilities Commission and their ratepayers comes in. So what is being proposed at this point is that utility customers would help offset some of those make-ready costs through small incremental numbers added to their bills, right? So ratepayer-funded infrastructure. And this is in front of the Utilities Commission now in our city and probably in others. And so what we're going to be asking our basically bidders to bid on is the stuff outside of the box, which is the charging hardware and all the services that go along with it, the cloud. The benefits of charging as a service, I started to talk a little bit about it. They're numerous. First of all, there's no upfront capital required. You pay as you go. It becomes an operating expense. All of it's funded by that fuel and maintenance savings, that big number that you saw. And even if you don't believe that number, all of it, it's still, it's large enough to where that pool of vehicles, we definitely believe we're going to be at basically at parity with what we're paying for liquid fuel. It's got guaranteed uptime. So we're looking at, how do we maintain all of our vehicles and make sure that charging infrastructure stays operational. It can be a long-term fixed price model, right? We're going to pay either a cents per mile or per kilowatt. It might be some type of a hybrid where we're paying a subscription plus a premium on our kilowatts. Either way, it's a model that's pay as you go. The software that they're putting in helps to reduce or avoid demand charges. So demand charges are where we plug in a bunch of stuff at once and all of a sudden we get a spike and we have to pay for that dearly. We don't want to avoid that, so that's where that software comes in. It's going to give us reporting on all of our charging stations throughout the city. So no matter what parking lot or what garage that we're in, all of it will be consolidated under one report. It's scalable, and we're going to maximize our total cost of ownership with charging as a service. So all these things taken together, we feel like this is the model that's going to work for Portland. And this is really what we're pushing forward. And you're going to, again, this RFP will be in market in the next 30 days. Now, things to consider as a city, we want to have a really tight partnership and integration with our utilities. So in our case, it's Portland General Electric and Pacific Power. We have to, they're the backbone. They're the people that have the electrons. So we need to work very closely with them. And they recognize too that it's a long-term partnership. For the charging as a service vendors, they have to be experienced, right? No matter what, I mean, just as any business, right? You have to look for a partner that has the experience. Not a lot of experience in this market. There are a couple that have been doing it for a little while, but I think people are going to learn quickly. You got to have a strong balance sheet. You can't go into this thinking that you can wing it. You got to have some pretty deep pockets to be able to support and sustain the level of charging. We're talking about electrifying 2,600 vehicles over time, so you got to have a very strong balance sheet. We want to have open protocols. OCPP is Open Charge Point Protocol. That is a standard, basically, that would allow if a vendor had to go out for whatever reason, that another vendor could come in and take over that. And that's obviously important. Integration with fleet management software. Most fleets have some type of software that manage their fleet. It's a database. We want to have tight integration with our charging that sort of filters directly into that fleet management software. And lastly, we want to have innovation. So we take a snapshot of where the charging is today, where the cloud is, where the software that maintains it. We want a partner that's going to continue to innovate and do the research and development that's necessary to kind of bring us into the next decade. That could be wireless charging. That could be other things that really are still immature at this point, but coming. So with that, I'll close and start to take some questions and answers. I appreciate the time, the panelists, and Forth. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Alan, for those insights on your city hacks to pay as you go for fleet transition, and hooray for the imminent RFP going out. So we are getting lots of excellent questions coming in the chat. We'll start with scrolling way up here. Okay, first one is on expense. Why is it so expensive? And panelists, please join back in, turn your webcams on. We'll just hopefully have a nice lively discussion. So why is it so expensive for this product? I can't get the upfront cost approved. And this question is from Tony Catamarti.
So as the vehicle manufacturer, I can take a stab at this. Batteries are the primary driver of the cost. Now, they've come down significantly. They're a third about what they were 4 years ago. And they're going to continue coming down, but still, a lot of the cost is on the battery side. The other part of the equation is volume, right? We're building these things in dozens and hundreds today, not in thousands and hundreds of thousands like your gasoline vehicle. So it's going to be a bit of a transition period where thankfully government will help us bridge that gap and give the industry some training wheels. But with time, those training wheels need to become weaker and weaker. The incentives need to drop so we can continue dropping our cost and our price. I have to say, at Motiv alone, our prices are about half what they were a year ago, year and a half ago.
And then on the charging side, again, everything I just mentioned, helping to reduce that amount of upfront cost, right, as a pay-as-you-go model. So I think, as vehicle costs come down, as we have more charging as a service opportunities and models, I think this becomes more and more affordable for all cities.
And Randal, I think you're on mute.
Yes, that mute button. Yeah, from engineering construction, we're always working on reducing costs, but every site is different. Every jurisdiction is different. Every location, the availability of utility and the timing, everything's different. It's hard to cookie cutter it. So we do our best, and as technology improves, and as there's especially in certain geographical locations where you've got the relationship of all the stakeholders, that there's certainly ways to make improvements.
Yeah. I have to add that if someone's in a situation where you just can't get the upfront costs approved, maybe look at a lease model. There are some manufacturers, not just us, but others too, who will offer you a lease option. That way you can help on, you can use the O&M savings in future months to pay for the higher lease amount. That's a good way to spread the cost out instead of putting it out in the upfront.
Great. Thanks, everyone. All right, so moving on to the second question. How long was the development time approximately for the software upgrade to 60 miles per hour bottleneck or not? And I think that was on the vehicle case studies, maybe Kash?
Yeah, I answered this in the chat, but we actually had 65 miles ready to go. We had intentionally limited to 60 because we thought they were neighborhood routes and they would need uh, more speeds than that. And only later we discovered that these are actually in the middle of Central Valley and they've got to get on the highway as part of the route. So it took us only a few weeks to put it on the vehicles and do some testing before handing the keys back to the fleets. But we had it ready to go.
Great. I think the next one's for Kash, but I think you probably answered it in the chat as well. So I'm going to skip over that one and go to number 4 here, which is when doing a pilot with a few vehicles, how do you determine which drivers will drive the new EV? Are you rotating between drivers? If so, in what schedule? Anyone want to take that?
I can give it a stop. So we're seeing that in the truck deployments we've done, usually there's dedicated drivers because the drivers like having their truck. This is my truck. This is what I take it on route. And how are they selecting it? Sometimes fleet managers will ask around and see if there's certain drivers who are more excited about driving an EV because they'll go the extra mile making sure it's plugged after the end of the day, making sure they're taking advantage of all the features or the regen braking. So if the fleet manager can get a little bit of an idea of if there are certain drivers who are interested, it is better to start with those. On the bus side of things, though, we've seen bus drivers pick different buses every day. So we've often had to train the driver trainer who will then train multiple drivers. And we do see the impact where certain drivers will get a better efficiency on the same bus versus another driver. And that should be a prompt to us to go out and train the new driver. But we're seeing both approaches in the market today.
Thanks, Kash. All right. Unless anyone else wants to chime in on that question, I'll move on to the next one, which is for Alan, actually. Okay. So is the Portland study available to the public? We're a regional planning agency that would like to assist our cities to do similar studies, and we're interested in the methodology. Looks like about 800 Portland vehicles weren't included in the study, and is this because they're medium or heavy duty vehicles not available in the market today?
So yeah, the study actually looked at vehicles that were sort of, we had data on. There was a lot of vehicles we didn't really have direct data, or they were hot seat vehicles, which means that they never really stopped police vehicles. So they just didn't really have a chance to plug in. So we're not quite there with those types of vehicles yet. The study itself, I'm not 100% positive if it's publicly available. As a city, anything is available for really records request. However, I'm not sure. There's VIN numbers and there's some other things in there that we may need to secure, but I can get back to Chris on that directly.
Great, thanks, Alan. Okay, so next question is from Adam Borison. Now and in the future, most EV owners will likely charge at home or maybe at work, meaning that public chargers are viewed as insurance. EV owners feel the need for them just in case, but won't use them very much. How does charging as a service work under these circumstances? A membership fee seems like the business needs to make money off the option or security value. Thoughts?
I think I agree with this. But we're talking about personal vehicles, I think, is what Adam is talking about. So very different than fleet vehicles. So on the fleet side, we're talking about everyday work vehicles that have to move a certain number of miles or a certain range. It's a different use case and business case than personal charging, which again, right now I think the numbers are 85% of people charge at home. The rest are probably at work, and then there's a small, what I've always called confidence network of public charging. Now, certainly there's many use cases for TNCs, Uber and Lyft, and so forth that need public charging. But really right now we're in a education and awareness phase of electrification. So the more public charging, the better. But yeah, I'll let anybody else comment on that.
I think you covered it. It's very different for a personal car owner versus a fleet owner. I would say that the public charge station network is expanding very rapidly. There's a lot of companies out there putting them on the ground every week. So I think that problems get easier and easier. And then those companies offer you a membership card where you show up, you swipe, you charge your truck, your vehicle, and off you go. So that model is already there today. They just need to expand it across the country.
Yeah, I'll add that there's definitely a big difference from a fleet where there's predictable routes and utilization. Charging as a service works in a unique manner for that. But as my colleagues mentioned, public charging is expanding, and there are some entities that are putting charging as an amenity. So as an example, Volta offers free charging at shopping malls and some select locations where it's built into a business case in a certain manner that it's an amenity for public. So I think as there's more electric vehicles, there's more charging available, we'll see different business models help enable it for everyone. And that's what we're really striving for as an industry, is the equity and the equality of access to this technology and benefit for all.
Thanks, Randal. Okay, moving on to our next question. Is there a future where PDX, the city, does not own the EV fleet? That's a good question.
I've got a dog in the background. Sorry about that. So I would say, yes, there is a future of that. And I know that talking with some of the vendors that have proposed on charging as a service are also talking about combining the vehicle lease inside of that. So it would be a full soup to nuts, everything, including charging infrastructure, vehicle, the whole thing. So I don't know that we're there this year, but we're looking forward to seeing what happens in these proposals.
Right. Okay, next question. How would you prioritize building a comprehensive electrification plan versus getting started with a few fleet vehicles and chargers? Any advice on getting started from square one? This maybe could be a Randal question.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with that. Thanks for the question. So the first step is definitely an analysis of the use case, all the stakeholders involved, the current technologies available. That's the first step. I like to think, again, I mentioned this, consider not just the transportation assets, but the facilities. Where's the charging going to happen? Depending on the routes, where are locations where it might make sense to do charging? Then we can look at different business models, both for that entity, but what are some of the adjacent entities, adjacent organizations that could also potentially share. Alan mentioned, as a service, and it could be transportation as a service where the vehicle is all included. So we have, what's amazing is in this industry, there are so many different possibilities and collaboration to come up with a lot of different scenarios of potential. But from an infrastructure standpoint, if you consider everything, then you can look at the resiliency needed. There's an opportunity to monetize energy with energy storage, working with utilities on the different rates available for the utility power. What kind of on-site assets can you add? The software that's available to balance the load with the availability of electrons. There's a lot to be done. So the initial planning is really important to put everything on the table and then decide what's best for your organization, all in mind with the advancement of technology over time. So planning the implementation in a way that's scalable and that makes sense. And the more you do this up front, the lower your cost could be. We also have a way to templatize certain like power modules. So there's certain like switchgear sizing, transformer sizing. So we can consider all that both from a geospatial perspective, but also a cost perspective and a scalability perspective. I can go on, but I'll just break there, allow my colleagues time. We can chat later separately.
Thanks, Randal. I'm going to take us to our last question here. And thank you so much, attendees, for chatting resources in here as our panelists are answering these questions. So several of you have mentioned planning for electric, but also autonomous. Could you discuss how that would be useful in today's fleets?
I'll just take a quick stab at that. So I think a lot of that's around safety. I think the more well, first of all, taking human elements out of it, we're not close to level 5 autonomy, which is full driverless, but certainly level 3s and 4s where we just get more safety features. So it's, as a fleet driver, as an operator, you take out some of the potential accidents, interactions with the public, things like that would, that we see every day in our fleet. We have accidents happen, right? So I think where autonomy comes in is really being able to take out a lot of the accidents and things that we've seen over time.
I'd like to add that there's already quite a bit of autonomous vehicles available and in operation. Great example are some of the airport shuttles. Some of them are on rail, but there's also an opportunity in some of those dedicated bus lanes where there's some of them like at San Diego where it's K-rails. So the autonomous technology is available, but to Alan's point, safety is really important. I think just recently San Francisco has unlocked another level of autonomous. They've allocated some certain streets for it. And then again, certain use cases where it's applicable today. The other use case that a lot of folks don't think about, but it's happening faster than anybody realizes, is air, like electric vehicle takeoff and landing. So autonomous comes into play. Imagine a drone that carries people. The technology's here. They're still working some things out, but that is an application where it is happening in the nearer term than most realize. And of course, safety is number one.
Okay, I think that's a wrap, everyone. And I know Simbi has some closing comments. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks, Tegan.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to say a big thank you to our sponsor, Idaho Power. Thank you to our moderator, Tegan, and to our speaker, Kash, Alan, and Randal for a great presentation today. We have the contact information for our speakers here. Please feel free to reach out with any additional questions. We will, as I mentioned earlier, we will be sharing the webinar recap email with you all before the end of the day, which will have the presentation slides, the webinar recording, and additional resources that our speakers spoke of during the webinar. So if you have any questions, look forward to that recap email coming shortly. We hope you can join us on November 10th for our next webinar on policy and administration updates. We'll examine what the future holds in clean transportation following the election on November 3rd, and we hope everyone has their plans on November 3rd on how we're voting. As everyone says, this is the most important election of our lifetime. So we want to say thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you in about 2 weeks on Tuesday, November 10th. Thank you all.
Take care. Thanks.